Hey, everybody, welcome to Second and Walnut, where we are going to learn together what it means to be America first from the first Americans. Um, this is a whole new type of podcast and show that I'm working on. As you can see, I've got a really bizarre background, kind of a little pub type setting. That's going to be important to this episode because this is the very first episode of Second and Walnut. And some of you are probably going, what is this about? What is Second and Walnut? And why is Mark got a weird background going on? First of all, my name is Mark McKeithrin. I am just a nerd. I like to read things, especially surrounding our founding and our case law history. I am definitely no attorney, but I am a niche nerd. We'll put it that way. But given this setting and everything, there's some things I want to address and point out that'll help tie this all in and make it sense. The fact that this is a pub background is important to the name of the show. And I want to talk to you in this episode about what this podcast is going to be about. What are we doing here? What are we discussing? And before we get rolling, though, I want to invite you guys all, just in the theme of it all, in nature, go ahead, grab a drink. I got a little Sam Adams here. Come on, it's Sam Adams. But have a drink with me, and we'll go through some history and some stuff together here. I wanted to talk about with this show that today's political climate it's complex. There's a lot of issues that we've got going on that tend to feel pretty unique to the 21st century, and very detached from our history. Our principles, our values, even pertinent today that were developed 238 years ago. Does it even matter? Like we've got AI, we've got drones, we've got cyber warfare and cybersecurity issues going on. Social media is a whole thing that never existed before. Your town square back then was just your community. Now it's the world. So how does that come into play? Immigration issues, even political questions and laws such as presidential immunity or recess appointments for cabinet members. There's so much going on today that are issues that just seem like they're unique to today. People talk about the idea that the founders they didn't have machine guns back in the 1790s. They kind of did, but so they couldn't envision the issues that we have today. Today we had a tragic, absolutely devastating attack on our nation in New Orleans. ISIS drove a truck right into a crowd of people trying to celebrate the day. Injured over 30 of them, killed 10 or more. I think I saw 11 now. Shot 2 cops. Like it was bad. These issues that we have going on, how can our history, how can our heritage, how can what happened in the late 1700s even apply anymore? Well, that's what this is going to be about. This is the things that we're going to dive into. And one of the things I want to say right off the bat is, our founding fathers, they were men of very diverse backgrounds, and tons of different experiences in education. Some of them were formally educated. Some of them taught themselves. Like Hamilton, for example, he started his life down in the Caribbean on a plantation. His parents died, and he moved to the mainland U.S. And the family that took him in happened to have in their house a library of over 1,500 books. It's one of the largest libraries in the colony. And he taught himself to read. He taught himself languages. He taught himself philosophy and everything just by reading. And there were others that did the same. So they're brilliant men from all sorts of different backgrounds. And when they got together in Philadelphia to start to plan how to develop this nation, how to build this country, the biggest thing that they had on their mind was how to preserve liberty for every individual, every person. Now, I can hear some of the people on the left going, "Oh, they didn't care about the slaves." Yeah, they did. They really did. And we're going to get into that. They wrote extensively about the evils and the cruelty of slavery. They debated it. They wrestled with it. Some of them refused to sign the Constitution because they didn't address it. Like it was, they fought for this stuff, and so much of that is not taught in our schools and our classes. It's not popular in TV. It's not brought up in uh, presidential debates or anything like that. Like we just don't hear about the nuances and extreme wide amount of subjects that they debated. They had multiple conventions that they got together with, and they usually lasted months, each of them. So they would spend a lot of time just trying to wrestle with these issues. There was complex things then that it was just a question of how do we get the maximum amount of liberty for people, and you have to provide protection for them. You have to provide security. You have to develop a robust economy. Our history, all of it, even from the founding, all the way up through of 200 and almost 50 years of Supreme Court case law, has wrestled with so many complex issues. And so, second to Walnut, one of the things that we're going to be dealing with is applying this history that we have from source materials, like letters, personal letters. Like John Adams wrote to his wife, and she wrote back, and they discussed the things that weighed on his mind, weighed on his heart about this nation. And others did that with their family members too. And then they wrote to each other, bounced ideas off from each other. We have preserved so much of that. We have all of those documents. We have all those documents. And so it's going to be a cool dive on this podcast. So we dive into what the founders wrestled with and debated and discussed, what they decided. And you're going to learn with me all of this and how it applies today. And one of the cool things is, and I want everyone to take heart in this, is they did not see eye to eye. They disagreed vehemently. They had duels. They shot each other over ideas and principles and values. Like it was a knockdown, drag out. It was not polite interactions, and they did not agree. And so when we look at today and we look at the fighting that we're doing, left and right, but also right on right, and left on left, and everything in between, all the nuanced things that we wrestle with and whatnot, it's no different. They did all of that as well back then. And so, we tend to think that we've lost touch with what it was like to be more genteel and more settled and grounded in values and like they had back then. And I'm telling you, people are the same today as they were in the late 1700s. And we're going to look into that. Some of the things that we're going to be diving into are not just the complex issues, but even the philosophers that inspired our founders, like Edmund Burke. This dude was a parliamentarian in England during our revolution, and he stood there in Parliament and defended the American colonies. He has widely been held as the father of modern conservatism. And so we're going to look at some of his influence on what it means to be conservative, what it means to have these kind of principles and everything. And he was engaged in a massive debate with Paine. Like, we read Common Sense and those kind of materials. Thomas Paine. There was a back and forth debate between the two of them, and it was brilliant. And it deals a lot with the stuff that we wrestle with today. So we'll look at some of that. We'll address the question and talk about how does an idea become a principle, and then how do principles become institutions. Like, we believe that everyone is entitled to self-defense. We believe that all men are created equal. Well, where did these principles come from? How did the institution of the nuclear family even get to be a central part of American culture when it's not in the others? Why does that matter? Like, that parlays into issues that we have today, like with the LGBTQIA questions, and what does that mean in our society? How does that impact the family structure, that whole institution? Questions of faith, and so on. So all of this is stuff that they've wrestled with for a long time. So that's going to bring us up to this next question. Why the name Second and Walnut? What is that? How does that relate to any of this? Well, this is lesson number one, folks. This is really cool. And I nerded out on this, and that's why we got it. So, Second and Walnut is an address. During the constitutional conventions, the founders were there for months. The second one was like 4 months. It was a nice long time. So, during that time, you've got to eat, you've got to drink, you've got to sleep. You need to decompress. You need to go out, have drinks with your friends, and so on. Speaking of which, drinks with your friends. Cheers. But they would go and hang out between sessions at this place called the City Tavern. The City Tavern is the birthplace of our country. Most people think of Independence Hall, where they actually wrote the Constitution and signed it and did all the official acts. The official sessions and meetings happened there. But we all know that's not where real things happen. That's not where real ideas are bounced off from each other. That's not where things are discussed and challenges done. You go out and you sit with your friends at a pub and you talk smack about the guys across the hall. You say how stupid an idea that is. Oh, but did you hear what Montague had to say? That was really interesting. We need to talk about that and see how that applies here. Like, those kind of conversations happened over a table, over a pint, over a meal. And they all happened there at the City Tavern. But it was much more than that. We can see George Washington found it to be absolutely important to him. He honored the 20-year-old Lafayette following his newly minted congressional appointment. The general, within 45, soon came to rely on the French aristocrats' military judgment, and thought of his family and perhaps a son he never had. All of that's true. That relationship started right here at Lafayette, and it's super crucial to Washington and to our founding, because it was through Lafayette that we were able to bring in the French military to help us win the revolution itself. So even from a tactical perspective, this has deep roots to our history. You can see where Washington and his aides made the tavern their headquarters before leaving for Brandywine. And en route to Yorktown, the general staff, both the French and American armies, were feted there. So it became a headquarters, it became a strategic place for planning battles, for planning movements, for diplomacy. This is where so much of our diplomacy happened. And even significant events, like you can see here on December 12th, 1783, Washington, as he was retiring and getting ready to leave and head back home, he paused overnight to bid farewell to friends that he'd probably not see again. So he said goodbye to the leaders of this nation to return home. And let me tell you, that was quite a party. We actually have the receipt from that party, and it was insane. I'm going to share that with you here in a moment. Right here, Washington can be seen in the tumultuous April 1789 when he stopped on his way to his first inauguration. The crowds were going crazy. They loved him. He had another party of over 250 people in attendance. Lots of music, fireworks, everything. It was a huge party. And his first official visit with his whole household was there. They all stayed. So even just from Washington's perspective, it was a huge ordeal. Paul Revere, in December 1773, right after the Boston Tea Party occurred, he stopped there to let Philadelphia know what was going on. And more so, a few weeks later, he had to come back because the British, in response to that Tea Party, they shut down the whole port of Boston. The whole economy was going down. And so he came back there to the tavern to meet with the people of Philadelphia to beg for their help, to try to figure out how to deal with this. And that's where one of the first committee of correspondences were formed. Now, if you don't know what the committee of correspondences were, they were really cool. That was where um, citizens of the city would get together and they would literally try to find ways to thwart British overreach. It was kind of a little subterfuge organization, and that's really what they served to do. They were little rebel rousers. It was pretty cool. Yeah, we can see that history where that came together. Committees from both the first Continental Congress and later ones met to draft reports, and over dinner, which usually began around 4 p.m., discussed the nation's business. One delegate commented that more could be learned from eavesdropping on a conversation at the tavern than by attending sessions at the State House. Yeah, so like I said, the real business happened here. And it's far more than that. Jefferson was eating his meals there while he wrote the Declaration of Independence. We see that the first 4th of July was celebrated there. John Adams called it, he had a whole big party, a naval review, 13 gun salutes, parades, fireworks, the whole thing happened at this location. Officers were elected at the tavern to form the first bank of the United States, the nation's first central bank. So again, our whole economy kind of formed there. And to make that even further in place, we can see that the City Tavern was also named the City Tavern and Place of Exchange. It's where the Philadelphia Stock Exchange got its birth. A lot of people don't know that stock trading is not a new invention. It's not something from the 20th century. It's as old as our country is itself, and much older. And so our first stock exchanges were formed here. Yeah, so we can see over here on this website, it's called fourwallswhiskey.com. Kind of love that. And this one, we can see where I was talking about the actual numbers of that receipt on how much George Washington and the gang partied. Let me find that for you here. Here we go. Tavern's owner receipt showed how much of these guys could drink. In one night, 55. So this was our delegates to the Constitution, the second convention. 55 of our most notable Americans went through 114 bottles of wine, 34 bottles of beer, 8 bottles of cider, and 7 large bowls of rum punch. 45 gallons of booze. They smoked cigars, listened to a 9-piece band, and got rowdy. The bill notes that charges for broken glasses and other glassware, they were breaking stuff all over there. They had just completed building a nation. So it was quite a party. It took them 3 days of sobering up before they could actually all get back together and sign the Constitution. The City Tavern is just such a central hub for where all the real work was had in building our nation. And the address for that was 2nd and Walnut Streets in Philadelphia. And so it's a tribute to that. What I want to do is take those conversations that were had over a pint, had over a beer, had over a meal, and have them with you. And we will look at our history. We will look at our principles and our values and where they came from and how they apply to today. Yeah, so that's kind of what it's going to be all about. And I hope that this first episode kind of set the tone for what you can expect and what you can see. Of course, each episode is going to get better as my own skills get better in presentation. But I wanted you to know that our history and the things that we are wrestling with right now are intertwined. George Washington, when he took office, he asked his Attorney General, Edmund Randolph, he's like, hey, can I do recess appointments? I need to do them. So this is the first time we're building a cabinet. And so the very question that we were wrestling with this year on that, we have the words of the first Attorney General on what Washington was allowed to do and what the Constitution said. and what it meant. So we get firsthand opinions from these people. Everyone talks about the Federalist Papers or Anti-Federalist Papers, and yes, we will touch on them, but there's so much more. There's so much more nuance to all of that was in their conversations, and we're going to bring all of that to life. So I hope that I see you next time, and I hope that this inspires you to pick up a little bit of your own history and look at maybe how your own families were involved in the nuances that made our country what it is. It's a rich history and it's a rich heritage, and it's one that we all have. And so on this New Year's, I want us to look forward to 2025 being a year of returning to our heritage, returning to our roots, returning to our value, so that we can revive, retake, and restore this republic.